Hey everybody, Coach Hamilton alongside Coach Dunham as always. We are the ACE Football Academy. Coach, an interesting conversation that we're going to have tonight that I think could go multiple directions. So we're just going to start talking and we'll see where it ends up.
I think our best conversation is when we wing it, which is what we're doing. We have no notes set
yeah,
up, but it just creates brainstorming,
yeah.
right off the top of our heads. So, um, I think this is something that every coach deals with. They may not realize it, and I think that comes down to how do you deal with it? How do you handle it? So, Coach, what are we talking
Well,
about here today?
well, I think one of the things that most clubs, I'm generalizing here and you hate to do that, but most clubs in where we are, at least in our area. I don't know what it looks like other places, but you don't get the opportunity to have multiple teams at one age level, right? Or one age group,
Mhm.
right? So, we have one 2011 team, we have one 2010 team, we have
Right.
one 09 team. Now, some of the younger ages, you have the opportunity to have multiple teams. In our where we are, we have two teams at the most per age group, and maybe we can dive into that a little bit as well if we have time at the end of this podcast. But the question here is, we're going to talk about the talent gap, especially in those moments where you only have one team at the club level. If you have one 2012, 2011, 2010, 09, 2009, 2009 team, right? Those 11v11 squads that you only field one team with, you're going to have, let's say you have 18 on a roster, and that's just the number I'm going to use. That's what most rosters probably are.
Mhm.
Um, you're going to have from your best player to your worst player, or your most talented to your least talented, however you want to look at it, the gap between those two players is going to be so massive. As a coach, how do you handle that? As a player, how do you handle that? If you're the most talented player, how do you handle that? If you're the least talented player, how are you going to handle that? So those are the conversations that our episode is going to focus around tonight.
Yeah, and there's other areas we can get into. It's not just talent ability, it's why you're on that team.
Yeah.
Some people are there because they want to be winners, they want to get better. Some people want to be pro players when they get older. Some are just there to have fun.
I'm there. I'm there because you're there.
Their friends are on the team.
Yeah.
They love hanging out with their friends. They're having a great time doing it. And they come and they put in the work and they try to help their team get better and try to win games. But they're not as affected by wins and losses as some of the other players go. And some are just there because maybe mom and dad say you're going to play soccer whether you like it or
Yeah.
not.
I know. So let's start with that conversation. Let's start with that. Why are you there? Right. Let's start with the why
Yeah.
are you there.
Right.
Let's eliminate the talent portion from it.
Okay.
Um, the player that comes to you and says, especially at the club level, and you and I both have high school level experience where we both have players who have played at the collegiate level. We both have players who have played at the D1 collegiate level.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, how do you handle that when a player comes to you and is just like, Coach, my goal is to play for the University of Kentucky men's soccer program.
Okay.
And you look at them and you're like, well, you know, that's not where your talent is. So let's start there. And let's make this real quick because I know we want to get into the training and game aspect of those. But I think you bring up an interesting point from a coach perspective where a player comes in with a mindset that maybe is not where, as coaches, we think it should be.
Yeah, and this is important where age level needs to be recognized. And we've said this many times. and you do this with your players, and I do it with mine, you got to be honest with them.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you're just rude with them. And it doesn't mean you're demeaning in some way. There's got to be some tact in the way you're speaking to that kid because their feelings are involved, and they're going to go home and going to tell mom and dad what you told them.
Or a version of what you told them.
Yeah, and I think the way to handle that is someone that's just not at that level. It's okay. Let's focus on this season right now. I love that you have goals.
Love that.
I love that you have goals, and we want to get you there. But let's focus on this team and this season first. And as you develop, maybe that can be more of a dream that we can have a discussion about. The other side of that is they're a junior in high school or a senior in high school, and they pretty much are what they are at that point. Now you're going to be maybe a little more direct in your conversation of, and again, being tactful. Well, maybe D1 isn't where you're going to end up. So let's not just focus on Division One. Let's think about NAIA, Division 2 and 3, because the purpose of going to college and playing is to play. And so let's focus on that there, Charlie, before you start reaching out to D1 coaches. Let's not be so specific here.
That's a short and sweet answer that I think is really, really spot on. I think you and I have had those conversations before.
Oh, we have.
With
yes.
multiple players, and in that moment it does stink as coaches to have to be, say what you want, but ultimately what we're doing in that moment is maybe crushing dreams a little bit, right? We like to look at it as we're recentering or refocusing dreams, but
refocusing.
But ultimately, that initial dream, we're kind of taking it and saying, yeah, we're not going to do that.
Coach, months ago, when we first started, we talked about the recruiting process.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that we talked about over and over again, finding the school that's the right fit.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get kids that are so focused on one school because it's their hometown school.
Yep.
Mom and dad went to that school. Maybe mom or dad played at that school, and I want to follow in their footsteps. Well, it's a different world.
Yeah.
And more kids are playing soccer, and it's much more competitive. But maybe that doesn't fit your style of play.
And we had Don Williams on. We've had Trip Rogers on. We've had all these players and coaches on. And my biggest takeaway from those conversations, or what you just alluded to early in your first talk, was it should never be D1 or bust.
Yeah, please don't be so specific to that. Yeah,
should never be D1 or bust. And I love what you said. You want to go to college to play. So why, if a D1 school wants me, that's awesome. But if their plan for me is to ride the bench and be a role player, then and if that's what I want to do, if that is what my dream is, hey, I don't care how I'm involved.
Yeah.
I just want to say I played for a D1 school, then fine, you do you. But if my goal is to get on the field, I need to assess where that works for me.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we're getting way off track here. This is why we usually have notes, so we can stick to the game plan. But, Coach, let's just kind of talk. As I mentioned in our opening, we have one team at most age groups, especially when you get into the 11v11 side, and the talent gap between your top player and your bottom player is usually relatively large, right?
In our area,
it is. in our area it is. So let's start on the training side of things. So you've played a game, maybe 2 games, and now you're getting into training. How do you set up your training? Do you have that thought process in your mind? Again, it's going to go back to the question, you brought up earlier, what level are we talking about here, right? Are we talking about the varsity level? Or are we talking about the youth level? So I think most of our listeners, let's just strictly stick to the youth level of things, right?
Yeah.
So let's say U14 and below. So we're going to stay out of the high school ranks.
Okay.
When you start to set up a training session, how do you handle setting up a drill? You're like, oh, Chris isn't going to be able to do well in this drill because he can't he can't handle the first touch or he can't handle the pressure or whatever it is.
Mhm.
So what does that look like for you as you start to set up a session?
Great question here. I think the first thing we got to remember is we're developing. We're not just in training sessions to go win games. I mean, that's our focus, but our number one priority is developing those players. So when I go into training sessions, my training session is expectation that everyone's going to perform at the highest level. And not everybody can do that, obviously. So if you have the numbers, and that's a big if, when you get to these smaller ages, when you're playing 7v7, maybe you've only got 10 players, 11 players on your squad. The hope is that you have two teams that age group where you can try to combine different things. So let's just say you've got enough numbers to cut things in half. If I can have a training session where I can have two grids going, where I've got my higher level players in one grid, my lower level players in another grid, that at least keeps the technical talent gap somewhat even. And now they're at least getting the correct touches on the ball. If they're making mistakes, it's not really hampering certain things. At least you're hoping it doesn't. If you can't, it hasn't been something. I don't like doing it, but sometimes I'll pull certain players out and set them aside and say, hey, focus on what's going on in here and see where you can improve at. Okay? But you've got to manipulate things to where your highest level kids are getting a quality session in there, while at the same time your low level kids are finding ways to be taught and develop at the same time.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that you said there, and I think the latter is the most important, where you said you have to make sure you're developing your top level players, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we hear that, as a teacher, we talk about this all the time on the educational side of things. Like, you have to teach to your top student, right? Because they need to grow just as much as the lower student needs to grow. And who are the hardest people to grow, right? It's the people who already have it. Those are the most challenging individuals to grow. So I owe it to you as a player to challenge you every time you show up, every session you show up. Now, I shouldn't say that. I owe it to you to challenge you most sessions you show up.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is perfectly okay for me to pull aside my best player and say, hey, look, today we're going to do some first touch or some, passing line, whatever we're going to do. And I just need you to be a leader. I know you're
point.
you're gonna be bored. I know it's not going to develop you in this 90-minute session, but hey, let's develop some leadership ability here.
Yeah. And another thing that you got to remember here, while you're still developing your best players, especially at the younger ages, we're saying like 10 and under, the reason why you're still making sure you're always developing, some people are just late bloomers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Maybe, and like me, I was always the shortest kid on every single team I played on. And you still need to recognize that when they hit that growth spurt, which may not be until middle school, may not be until high school, if they're still being pushed to get better and develop, maybe their freshman year, they just exploded into this amazing player. But if you've got that coach who's like, I'm so tired of that guy messing up his touches every single time, just go over there and sit on the sideline. Well, maybe you just lost an opportunity to have a stud player the next 2 to 3 years.
No, I agree, and I think that's important. Like,
and it's hard to do, and I get it.
Yeah. So I think in my training session, I guess the ultimate line here is you have to. I mean, I'm going to go back to a training session I just ran 2 nights ago. It did not go well.
Okay.
It was.
Which
it
happens.
was. Yeah. No. It was too quick. It was too high level for even my most advanced player, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would rather have that moment where, okay, and all of a sudden I have to start dialing it back versus have a session that is easy for everyone, right?
Yeah.
And so I think having that mindset of coaching to your most talent or to your best talent is so important, because if you can improve your best talent or your most talented player, then you are absolutely improving your least talented player.
Yeah.
Even if it is secondhand, right? But they are getting that development, whether it's through play, whether it's through visuals or whatever it is. But I think coaching to your highest level has to be a normal thing.
Well, it's about holding everybody to a standard.
Yeah.
I mean,
Great
not
point.
everybody's going to be the best player on the team, and not everybody's going to be the greatest goal scorer, and everybody's going to be the best defender. But you've got to hold everybody to a certain standard that says, hey, you're not giving me the right effort today.
Yeah.
And you may be my best player. If you're not giving me an effort, then you're not trying hard enough to be a better player. If you're my worst player on the field, well, maybe your effort is why you're not getting better. You've got to be held to a certain standard to push them to be better. Because that's what the role of a coach is. I've got to push you beyond your comfort zone and push you to make mistakes, to fail, because that's where we're learning. And if you're just saying, hey, it's okay, don't worry about it, we'll try again next week. If you're making excuses for those players, now you're hindering their development. So, again, it's a fine line to come to. It can be very difficult, but coaching isn't supposed to be easy.
Yeah.
You gotta get through those hard points because, like I said before, the lower level talented players in a couple years, they may end up being your best players because they just need some time to develop.
Well, and I know I'm pulling up my phone at the moment because I'm trying to find I was sent a visual the other day, so I want to switch our gear to game day, right?
Okay.
So let's switch from training the talent gap to playing the talent gap, right? So I was trying to find a visual and I can't now that I'm looking for it, but um it was a soccer specific visual, but I always remember it growing up as a baseball visual where like, all right, on game day, your shortest player plays second, and your most talented player plays center field, and the fastest kid plays, shortstop, and the worst kid plays right field because the ball never goes straight, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to find that visual, and while I'm going to throw something to you while you're talking, I'll bring it up. So let's switch to game day. And let's say, I guess this is hard to describe because, when we're talking about that talent gap, I think we hit it well in training. You train to your top talent,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But on game day, you can't game to your top talent, right? That just doesn't work. So I guess, like, I don't know how to ask this question. I don't know what question I'm trying to ask, but
Okay.
what does it look like for you getting talent on the field on game day? Is it I'm going to put my best talent, try to go score some goals? Am I going to put my best talent, try to prevent some goals? Am I going to play all my talent together and then put all my subs in together? What does that kind of look like for you as a coach on game day?
Yeah, and again, I think it's important to recognize age levels. We're focusing on 14 and under, and I even discuss about the 10-year-olds and younger than that. Everybody needs to be playing on the field, especially at the 10 years and younger, because
Absolutely.
we're developing. You don't know what the 8-year-old is going to be when they turn 14 years old. There's just no way of knowing if they're going to hit a big growth spurt or not. However, I think every coach, it is perfectly okay and perfectly normal to have a starting lineup for every game, where it's the same lineup every single game.
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And if you want to mix that up a couple games here and there's nothing wrong with that. But I still feel like you need to give your low-level talent a chance to prove themselves because some kids are different on game day.
Yeah.
Some kids rise to the occasion on game days. And maybe the kid that's having struggles with first touch and getting good passes in, maybe he's the hardest working kid on game day. He's just outrunning. He's winning every 50-50 ball. He's winning every goal kick or every punt out of the air. He may not be able to pass the ball to the wing, but he's winning you critical moments in the game. So while you're developing one area of their game, you're still improving on different areas as they're going on. So I think at the younger ages, you've got to balance your top talent and your low level talent. Now, as you get a little bit older, you can start focusing on your starting lineup. Again, we're focusing on our top level talent and improving them. But you still need to make sure your subs are getting minutes to develop and show that they're getting improvements on the field. I know there's not a right answer here.
There's not.
I think the biggest thing is people need minutes and they need repetitions in game day because they need a chance to show that they're improving, that they've got the fight in them, and you've got to express to them that they have value on that team. And I think that's a big thing to point out there.
Yeah, and I could not agree with that more. It is where it's my biggest struggle as a coach is playing time. I struggle with playing time as a coach so wholeheartedly because to what you just said, especially in the younger age groups, you're showing up, you're there, unfortunately you're paying the money.
Yeah.
You need to play. Versus as we get into those older age groups, yeah, you're showing up, yeah, you're paying the money, but winning starts to matter. And
I think winning always matters.
It does.
I mean,
no, I agree.
I think even at the academy level, winning still matters. It may not be the number one priority,
right?
But winning makes things a lot more fun.
Yeah,
and it makes people come back.
Yeah,
when they're having fun.
Yeah, and so I just think that's such a difficult conversation. And again, we're going to end up talking about playing time through this talent gap conversation, but I think playing time in the talent gap conversation is a part of it, right? I mean,
absolutely.
If I have 14 kids or let's even say 18 kids on an 11v11 team, and I have 4 players who are head and shoulders above everybody else, I'm not going to take those 4 players off the field.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that there's less playing time for the 7 others on that are going to be on the field, right?
Yeah.
And let's just be honest, maybe 6 others if you have one specific goalie. So I just think the talent gap, it might be the outside of playing time, for me as a coach, managing the talent gap might be one of the hardest things I have to do as a coach.
I would agree because sometimes it can make and break your season.
Yeah.
And there's no question about that.
Coach, this is a fun conversation. It's a difficult conversation, right? Because
absolutely,
there are no, as you just mentioned, there are no right or wrong answers here. We, everybody deals with it. Everybody deals with that talent gap. And
now, I'm sorry to cut you off there.
No, you're
One thing
fine.
that's popped in my head when we're talking about the game situations, I think it's important to point out when you're at the academy age, which is like 8 years old,
right,
9 years old, everybody should be getting equal playing time.
No, agreed.
And I think that's the one point in a kid's select career where I don't want to say talent doesn't matter. Playing time is what matters.
Correct. They want to play.
And they want to play. But if they're not on the field, if you're so focused on winning every single game and you're leaving 3 kids on the sideline for maybe 10 minutes of the game, number one, they're probably not coming back.
Yeah.
And number 2, you're not giving them a chance to develop. You've got to give everybody a chance to develop. They need that game situation at a higher level to get used to playing at a select level and getting used to different levels of talent that they're coming up against. Now, as you get out of the academy, now maybe you can start shifting slowly as you get older. But I firmly agree that as you get older, playing time becomes a factor in each team.
So I love that you brought this up because I think this is going to be a good leeway into the conversations we want to start having in the future with knowing your role, right?
Yeah.
This is a series that Coach Donovan and I really want to get off the ground and really want to talk about. But it's not going. I mean, Coach Dunham and I could talk about knowing your role as a player or as a coach all night long, right? We could talk about knowing your role as a sub, knowing your role as a starter, knowing your role as a bench player, right? But we would love to have some parents, have some players on to have those conversations with us about how do you help your player know their role, whether they are the star player or they're the player that gets 4 or 5, 6 minutes a half, right?
Yeah.
So if you're listening and you are interested in being a part of that conversation, we would love to have you on again. We would, Coach Dunham and I would love to spin that into a whole series, a coach, player, parent perspective. So reach out to us, let us know. Ace Football Academy on Facebook, Ace_football on X or Twitter or however, whatever you call it nowadays. Coach Hamilton, Coach Dunham, we appreciate you listening to another fun conversation. This has been the Ace Football Academy. Go kick some ace.